It was a dark and stormy night.
Kill that.
Hello and welcome back to Storytime with Captain Xavier. I am Captain Xavier, and while most people in the mod community who had their eyes on End War this weekend, I was down in Oregon at Afterworlds. Afterworlds is a post-apocalyptic LARP that I got into back in 2016. Somebody that I met through another hobby community of mine told me about this, and it sounded like so much fun I had to go. So I got to go into 2 games in 2016, and I played Captain Xavier, a mercenary soldier. It actually was the same character from HVZ. That actually got made canon. I talked to the guy who wrote the story and said, hey, what do you think of this idea for my character's backstory? And I said, I think that's awesome. I'll consider it canon now. And so I got to be Captain Xavier, and I hired myself out as a mercenary and got signed on with a group, and it was a lot of fun. I got to do a lot of fighting. I got to do, it was loads and loads of fun. And I got to go for those 2 years back in 2016 before my channel had even really taken off, had gotten very big at all. Nobody knew who I was at the first game. By the second game, some people were now watching my channel, but not a lot. And then for loads of reasons, I wasn't able to go at all in 2017, just largely because the channel had gotten so big and work was ridiculously busy and loads of other things. I wasn't able to go. And then I also wasn't able to go to the first game of 2018, again, because of work. And that one actually worked out well because earlier this year, I reached out to the guy who wrote the story, Pete, and said, hey, I've got this blaster that I think could be a lot of fun in the hands of an NPC. A player would never be able to use this because ammunition is a major commodity within Afterworlds, being the apocalypse and all. Guns you can get a hold of, but bullets are a problem. And you either have to make them or buy them. To make them, you have to gather materials out in the waste, which is dangerous. To buy them, you have to have currency, which are caps. And 1 cap will buy you 1 dart. A single rival round, because they do more damage, costs 5 caps. So it would cost you 100 caps to operate tier for 1 second. And that's just not really feasible for players. Caps are far more valuable than that. So no player could ever really reasonably use a blaster this powerful. But an NPC could, because they're NPCs. They don't have ammo problems, because they can just go get them from the game. So I reached out to him. He said, absolutely, but it's going to take me at least a game to be able to set up a story arc for a character that powerful. So it worked out well that I wasn't able to go to the first game because I wouldn't have been able to play with tier anyway. And I hadn't made all of the upgrades that you've no doubt noticed. I then got my hands on this helmet, which is kind of a tactical Mandalorian-looking helmet, which is really cool. So he set up the storyline for me, and I got to be Ant, the anthropomorphic neutralization turret. I was literally the human personification, or the humanoid personification of his character's right hand. Pete, the guy who writes the story, he's been playing, one of the main characters that he plays is called Fact. And I should probably look up what that means so that I can tell you. And it was supposed to be a one-off character that he played as a villain in a game 3 years ago, and then he was supposed to be killed, and that was supposed to be it. But people liked the character so much that they ended up going off script and keeping him alive. So I ended up playing him for 3 years, and it was a hugely complicated storyline because Fact was I believe the AI for the Hive, which was like the Vault from Fallout. And they ended up eventually giving himself a body and then becoming unshackled, as it were, as it's called, from the system. So he was now his own. He wasn't controlled by the evil corporation or whoever was controlling him. And he set out to try to become more human. And it was a long and bumpy road because he was seeing humanity not at their best. He was seeing them in the middle of an apocalypse. And so he was learning humanity from people at the worst of humanity's nature. And so it took him a long time to really get a grip on it. And a lot of characters didn't trust him or hated him or didn't like him, and other characters loved him. And it was just a very, very rich character, personality-wise. But for at some point, he had a very powerful gun on his right hand called the Neutralization turret. And I was the humanoid personification of that. And so he set me to patrolling the waste to keep it safe from anything. And so when I got there, That was my job. I was an automated turret that simply walked the roads of the waste, keeping them clear of any dangers. Well, everybody in Afterworlds is dangerous, so I shot anyone who was in the road in front of me. And as a result, a lot of fear and confusion and rumors and theories got spread very quickly. Because I walked up to the first group. The game started at 5 o'clock on Friday. I think around 6 o'clock I went into play. And I came around the corner, large group of humans. I don't know what they were doing. I don't care. I opened fire. They asked, they tried asking questions. They tried scouting me. They tried, communicating with me, reasoning with me. Nope, I just shot at them. And unfortunately, Tyr then suffered his first of many, many failures. And the hose came disconnected from the blaster. And so the gun quit shooting. So I had to, back down. But they had seen the potential firepower and had no idea what was going on. I then went and I got it fixed, and I went back into play, and I continued to patrol and attack people. People continued to try to communicate with me. They'd call out, who are you? What do you want? What are you doing? What is your name? There's a special ability in the game called Scout, that if you scout somebody, they have to tell you what their race is. And if they tried scouting me, I would call back Survivor. And what Survivor means, roughly speaking, because usually you call it your race, human, undying, android, alien, whatever, mutant. But I called back Survivor, and Survivor means, essentially, there is no game mechanic to describe how powerful I am, you better run. And not everybody knew that, because there were a lot of new players. But those that did know, because Fact would call Survivor, and other NPCs, super powerful NPCs from the past would call Survivor. And so most people, I say Survivor, and they just bolted, just fled. And, again, rumors started flying. Who was I? What was I? I wouldn't communicate, and I attacked anybody who was in front of me. Eventually, they started to notice, or originally, first they were going, well, is he only attacking certain people? Is he only attacking non-humans? Is he only attacking non-androids? What's going on here? There was also a plague going around, and so some people thought maybe that I was hunting plague victims to try to stem the tide of the plague. And so a lot of people would call out that, we're not infected, you don't have to worry, don't kill us. But that wasn't it. I would shoot them if they got in my way. And eventually somebody tried just standing out of the road. They put up their hands, didn't make any threatening motions. They stood aside and just let me pass. And I walked right by them. And so that got them thinking, well, maybe you just have to not threaten him. But people would try to be non-threatening on the road, and I'd shoot them. And then I was trying to make it more obvious, but ended up making it more confusing. If someone was standing right at the edge of the road, holding still and not looking threatening, I'd walk up right in front of them, turn and look at them, look down at their feet to make sure that they were indeed fully off of the road, look back up, and then walk on. And so people thought that I was scanning them for some reason, checking to see if they were infected or checking to see what their race was or whatever. Other people thought that it was motion, that since they were standing very still, I didn't shoot them because I was a T-Rex apparently. My movement was based on, or my vision was based on movement. So some people tried just freezing, not moving, but were standing in the middle of the road and got lit up. Other people tried to insist that, I'm human, don't shoot me, and they'd get lit up. One of the ones that I felt kind of bad about was an android who was with a group of two other people, and the two people just bolted, and she ran to the side of a building and hid around the corner. And when I got level with her, I again looked at her, scouted her. She said android. She scouted me. I said survivor. She apparently didn't know what this meant. I then walked on, and she filed in behind me and followed me for about a half an hour, constantly asking me questions. Hello, what is your name? Hello, why are you here? Hello, what do you want? And I never responded to any of it because I didn't have a personality. I was an automated turret. And she eventually wandered off, and later on that day she ended up behind me again. And again, followed me around, asking me questions, and people noticed that I wasn't attacking her. So again, rumors spread. He doesn't attack androids. Or he doesn't attack you if you're behind him. Or, things like that. But I still never responded. And then unfortunately later, I ran into her a third time, and there was a large group of people at the crossroads, and she was there among them. And I came around the corner and opened fire at everybody. And by sheer luck, she didn't get hit. And she was standing in the middle of the road, and she mistakenly believed that since I hadn't attacked her before, I wouldn't attack her now, and since I hadn't shot her just a moment ago, she must be safe. But she was standing in the middle of the road, so I lit her up from toe to shoulder, and then just walked by without breaking stride. And she was a little confused by that. And a lot of people were then confused, like, well, apparently that wasn't it. And they continued to some people would actually test it. And I think one person was actually testing to see how much ammo I had because they just stood in the road getting shot. And eventually they ran out of flags and I walked on because I wasn't going to run out of ammo. So it was a lot of fun. But eventually they worked out. Just stay off the road and don't make any threatening movement. There were a couple of times where people did decide to fight. Large enough groups, if they felt they had enough powerful characters, they would try to fight. And a couple of times it worked out well because Tyr had another failure, and so I had to back down. Other times Tyr did not have a failure, and I wiped them out. One of the things that was good at stopping Tyr was shields. There was a class in the game called Stalwarts who have a shield that is completely impervious to bullets. And so if there were enough of them, they could form some kind of a shield wall, or they could get close enough to try to attack me in melee. But I have a rocket launcher. And while rockets don't blow up shields in Afterworlds, they do area of effect damage that do damage the person who has the shield. And so at one point, a group of 3 stalwarts blocked the road, and I fired a rocket into the middle one, and they all took one flag, and they figured they had enough flags that they could survive. And then they saw me reach into a pouch and pull out another rocket and reload, and they decided, maybe we don't, and they bolted. I think one of my favorite moments, I was heading towards a curve in the road, and there was a porta potty at the corner, and just as I got there, the door opened up, and a guy came out and found himself staring, point blank range, maybe 10 feet away from me. And he just went back in, shut the door, locked the door, and waited. And it was such a magnificent moment. I had to step out of game and get a drink and laugh. It was fantastic. And then I went back along my marching. And my favorite was at night, once it got dark, because people couldn't tell who I was. And in Afterworlds, there are a lot of nasty things roving around at night. There are all kinds of zombies and evil monsters and radstorms and evil humans, and you never know what's going to be coming around the corner. But if you have a large enough group, you can usually be reasonably safe. Zombies are designed to be killable by the players so that they can get XP and have a challenge and have fun. So, you don't necessarily run from anything that came down the road, especially if you're in a group of, 7 or 8 people. So when they hear someone coming down the road, they'd call, who goes there? I would say nothing. Friend or foe? I would say nothing. Alive or dead? I would say nothing. Scout 20? I would say survivor, and open fire. And they would scatter like mice into the dark. Sometimes they would just clear the road. Other times they just bolted because they just wanted to be gone. But it was so much fun. I also then continued to do the scanning, walking up to people, looking down at their feet, looking up. And a lot of people were genuinely terrified of that because they didn't know what I was doing. They didn't know if I was going to suddenly decide they were a target and light them up. Apparently it was genuinely frightening. There are some great accounts by some of the players when they, after the event, somebody posted on the board, tell us your scariest moment. And a couple of them involved me. My favorite one was when the game changed, because Fact was a major character in this particular game. He'd been playing the character for 3 years. That was supposed to be a one-off character. He decided he wanted to finally be done with Fact so he could move on to different storylines and play different characters and explore the world more. And so the goal of this game was the death of Fact. And so the plague that was spreading was getting worse, much worse, and there was no real way to combat it yet. And so they had an NPC scientist that was telling him, okay, I can help build a device that will hold back the plague until we can find a true cure, but I'm going to need a super powerful power source. And the only thing in the entire waste that was powerful enough to power the device was Fact's core. The problem was his personality was linked to the core, and so tearing out the core would essentially kill him, or it would kill his personality. And he didn't want to die. He'd become human enough that he didn't wish to die. And so they were either going to have to attack him, which was going to be a mess because he was a super powerful character, or they were going to have to talk him out of it, talk him into giving up his core. And they went with option B. They actually managed to convince him that for the better good of humanity and for the better good of the waste, he should give up his core so that they can do this. And he warned him, when I pull this out, it's basically a thermonuclear device. It could blow up the entire waste. Unless you were on the very, very edge, the furthest part you could get from him in the site, you were probably going to die. And so everybody fled except a handful of players who said, no, we've been here from the beginning. We've fought with Fact. We've reasoned with Fact. We've helped Fact. We're here for you. If you die, we're going to die with you. If you're going to make this sacrifice, we will sacrifice ourselves with you. Right around this time, I walk in with my dinner. I've taken my gear off. I'm ready to rest, have a little snack, chat with some people, and then go to bed. And I walk into this, and I'm like, oh, God. So I went and I put my gear back on because I knew what was coming. When they pulled his core out, it didn't go nuclear, but he did slump over on the table, essentially dead. And there was a lot of serious emotions there. People were very close to this character. This was someone that they'd known for years. There were a lot of genuine tears and emotion about this character dying. What he didn't mention and what they didn't know was it didn't actually destroy him. His body, still regenerated, which was something, they tried killing him in the past and he just comes back in a new body because he could just make a new one because of nanite technology or some such. But they took out his core, so they took his personality, which is where his morals were, where his sense of humanity was. And so this time, when his body reset, it went back to its factory default settings, essentially, which, as you may remember, was a villain. And he was the one who controlled me. So when he lost his morality and went back to the villain-type character, I became unshackled to the point that I could simply kill anything that I saw, no matter where it was, no matter what it was doing. I became just a full-on Terminator, kill everything on sight. And so I got to put my gear back on and go out into the night, but the players don't know this. And so I got to roleplay the unshackling of Ant, and the group of people that were unfortunately the first humans I came across got to see it all. It was like 2 a.m. or maybe even later. I don't know what time it was. But I walked past this group that was at a scavenging station off the road. They believed that they were safe. I would just walk by because they weren't threatening me. They were on the side of the road. I walked into a patch of moonlight and malfunctioned, called malfunction, and shut down, and then sat there for a minute, and then powered back up, paused, and took off my helmet. And that was the very visual and, functional unshackling of my character. I then called in a kind of confused voice, unshackled, and then turned towards them, and apparently I chuckled. I don't recall chuckling, but it definitely sounds like something that I would do. I then called weapons free and opened fire. To do proper credit to that situation, I'm going to read to you what one of the people that was standing there said. When they were asked, when it was posted on the board after the event, give us your scariest moment, theirs was the first response, and it was of that moment. The first reply was from Grace, and what she had to say was, scariest, accepting that I was going to die as the ant unit unshackled next to me, Isolde and Mal, at a scav site, and feeling my blood actually run cold. You seriously made the game very real. It was so cool to be able to immerse yourself in the world to the point of feeling abject terror in that moment. It was awesome, and your slight chuckle as you turned will haunt my dreams. And that reply was when I knew that I had done a good job as this character. Because that was my goal. As an NPC, I didn't want to actually kill everybody. I didn't want to try to win. I wanted to make the game more fun, more terrifying, more real by having this super powerful, completely emotionless killing machine walking around, allowing them to believe that they'd figured out that they were actually could be safe from it, and then yanking that out from under them. And it was perfect. And I didn't kill them because I needed them to spread the word. So I could have lit them up, I could have followed them, I could have hosed them down, but I wanted them to go forth and tell everyone that, oh God, the ant unit has gone unshackled. And within minutes of that encounter, I could literally hear and feel the fear and stress and the entire site go up. I could hear in the far distance people yelling to everyone they passed, that I'd gone crazy, that they weren't safe, that, don't freeze, don't get off the road, just run, get away from it. And so I went on an absolute murder rampage and just terrorized and killed everything and everyone. And people very quickly fled to the camps, which had locked doors or where they could hide. One of the main structures, the beautiful thing about Afterworlds is the guy who created the actual game, the game developer, owns the land that it's played on, and so they are developing whole cities and camps and structures and all of that. This is the opening. This is Sanctuary, one of the major cities. So this is part of Afterworlds. This is Sanctuary. It's one of the large settlements they have actually built. Afterworlds is held on a man's property, the guy who designed the game and runs it. And so they have built several such villages. This one is Sanctuary. There's another one called Haven, and then there's going to be a third one next year. And then there are camps and outposts all throughout his property that have different qualities and different kinds of people running around them, and it changes every single time. They bring out work crews and they tear the place apart and put it back together again. They've got casinos and bars, and I think this is quite definitely the bar. They've got barracks and armories and shops and churches and all sorts of weird stuff. So it's an absolutely amazing location since they can actually build on it. And it's called Sanctuary because it's more or less safe. The front gate is more or less impervious to attack, except from the most powerful characters. Even I don't believe I could actually destroy the front gate of Sanctuary. But the back gate was vulnerable to rockets. So I blew open the back door and went in and just started killing everybody in my path. And they fled, and I understand that there was a great, terrible rush to get out the front door and getting it open, getting everybody out. One poor guy didn't make it out in time. I came around the corner to the front door and lit him up toe to nose, and he role-played it magnificently as if he was getting lit, or at least I thought he was. He said afterwards, that wasn't role-play nothing. That thing hurts at point-blank range. And I followed them out the door and continued to attack, and they finally rallied and were able to push me back, and once again Tyr had a failure, and so they successfully pushed me back. And at that point, I finally went to bed. It was like 4 a.m. At some point in the night, Fact came back, but this time as Evil Fact, which they decided to refer to as Fiction, which is just an awesome, awesome thing to do, to have the evil side of Fact be fiction. Just good stuff. I love these people. Their roleplay is absolutely amazing. And so he started attacking Sanctuary, and killed a whole mess of people. And then the next day, as everyone is now thoroughly panicked because the ant unit's gone berserk, Fiction has come out and is going berserk, and we then went through and he picked up the other turrets. There were 7 locations on site at the beginning of the game where turrets kept popping up and just shooting at anybody in sight. And they managed to take out a bunch of them, but the ones that remained became even more powerful. He walked up to them and unshackled them all. And so there was me and 2 others, one of which was armed with my modified Nemesis, and the other one was armed with an Artemis. And we then went and we laid siege to Sanctuary together. And this was how it looked. So at that point, they realized, if we don't do something, these guys are going to kill us all. And so we retreated back to the hive, and the whole of the waste united together and came to wipe us out. And I unfortunately didn't get any video of that. And unfortunately, this is the one slight damp moment of the entire event. After the attack on Sanctuary, Tyr had another major failure. A solder joint broke in the on switch. But I was able to get it fixed. There was somebody who had a soldering iron on site. Took me, 15 minutes or so to get it apart and get it fixed. Tested it. It worked fine. We went to do the final stand. And our standing orders were that we were impervious to everything. To all attacks, to all damage, to all status calls. We were to fire until we ran out of ammo. And when and only when we were out of ammo were we to then shut down. Well, I had a half a tank on me at that time. I had 1,000 rounds that I was going to get to burn through, just hosing everybody. And as well as 8 rockets to blow people up. And the humans closed in, the players closed in, they made their move, I pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. And I thought the gun had failed, that there was a break, that there was a jam. And so the contingency plan was fire rockets. So I just started firing rockets into every shield I could see, trying to take people out. Finally ran out of rockets, so I was out of ammo. I went into my dying count to get ready to do my self-destruct. And while tinkering with it, I realized I had forgotten to turn on the flywheels. I was so angry. I tested it. Sure enough, it was working. Well, I had an ability called Final Strike, where while in my dying count at any point, I could do one last attack. So I popped back up and I started firing, and I decided to not go until I was empty because, you know, it was already late into the fight. The other two turrets were already down. Fact was getting swarmed, and I didn't want to go too far. So I fired off a couple of hundred rounds, probably, maybe less than that even, and then went down and detonated, and then stood aside and watched Fact have his last stand. And that was, in the end, I'm actually glad I didn't decide to run the tank dry, because it wasn't my last stand. I was not the main NPC. I was a secondary NPC at best. It was Fact's last stand, or in this case, Fiction's last stand. It was the final battle for this character that people had come to love or hate over the course of 3 years. It was his big show, and I'm glad I didn't end up stealing it, because if I'd had to drain the tank, it would have taken 5 minutes at least to empty even half a tank at the rate of fire that I was firing, because they had me turn it way down. I wasn't firing the full 20 rounds. I was firing closer to 5 to 7 rounds a second, because otherwise I would have killed everybody. And so, in the end, I'm glad that it failed when it did, and that I was able to at least fire the rockets and do some damage and scare everybody and get my final big volley in at the very end, and then let Pete, as Fiction, have his glorious last stand, and it was fantastic. And then there was another great sacrifice where they had a device that could destroy him forever. It was a tiny black hole bomb. Another mad scientist that was another character who was a vast opponent of Fact. Never trusted him, never liked him. And there was a lot of question as to which one of them was actually the bad guy. And so when they went to him and said, is there any way we can destroy Fact permanently? He goes, I could make a small black hole bomb. Nobody questioned it. You'd think someone would go, hang on, that doesn't sound like a good idea. But they were just like, what parts do we need? And so they built it, and he went to detonate it. He had a remote device for it, and the remote quit working. He was like, whoever sets this off, they're not going to make it out. They're going to die, and I don't win. And he hemmed and hawed. And so a character who was wanting a valiant last stand, who had actually asked Pete to write in a valiant death for him, grabbed the bomb and rushed in and set it off. People tried to stop him, but he got there before they could, and kaboom. And it was absolutely awesome. The whole event was just the most fun I've had in a very, very, very long time. The fact that I didn't have to do any thinking. Just walk around, and if they stand in front of you, shoot them. I didn't have to come up with any dialogue. I didn't have to pay attention to a lot of the rules, because I was immune to almost all of it. It really made for a very enjoyable game, getting back into it, learning the system again. And I will get to play NPCs again. I've asked, hey, I prefer playing NPCs. I enjoy playing NPCs, and I have the ability to make NPCs that are truly powerful and really, really fun and interesting. I've been doing it for years. What do you got for me? And he said, I've got the exact character I want you to play. So I will be playing a reoccurring NPC in the future that is going to be a lot of fun. I had just, seeing old friends, people that I'd known from back in 2016, seeing them again. And then a lot of the new people that had come in while I was gone, they watched my channel. Like, hey, they post on the Afterworlds boards, like when I posted Tier for the first time, like, have you seen this? This is amazing. And the veterans are like, yeah, he comes to Afterworlds. Yeah, we know him. We've met him. He's cool. People were like, what? And so a lot of them, when they heard that I was coming, they're like, oh my god, I get to meet Captain Xavier. And then they, of course, had to fight Tier, which they thought was absolutely fantastic, and it was really, really cool. People brought me Skittles. People got me gummies. One of the camps brought me root beer, and I never got the time to go down and get any of it. I'm so sorry, Raiders. You guys are awesome. Thank you for bringing me the root beer. Next time I will drink root beer with you, and it will be fantastic. Another great scariest moment that involved the ant unit was Christine, who said, scariest moment. I stepped out of Sanctuary with the decently sized group I'm with, and as I reach the point where I'm close to the door but not close enough to run in and take cover, I hear the sounds of fear and see people running back, but then screams of, stay still, don't move! Just then, I see the source of the agitation is, and just go numb. Captain Xavier's machine gun just phased into being right in front of us. Still hearing screams to stay still, I throw myself against the door of Sanctuary and try to melt into it as much as I can as the machine gun walks towards us. Time literally stood still as he approached my position. Stops. Does a full body turn right towards me. I stared down those barrels for what felt like forever before he turned and continued walking. That was so intense. Chaylo, you are immensely amazing. Thank you so much for coming out. Yeah, so that was Afterworlds. And here are pictures of the people, most of which I don't know their names because my character didn't interact with any of them except to shoot them. But hopefully, most of the one, I got all of you. So here's the montage. You people are awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching.